What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Yanez, and I, we are on our weekly episode. We were kind of riffing before we started recording about, I got a message in from one of the listeners just about one of the conversations that Gabe and I were having, and him and I were discussing how, you know, we approach situations sometimes a little bit differently, and we were talking about outlooks. And I think the topic that we wanted to dive into right now, we have a variety of topics I want to discuss. One in particular, Gabe, that I sent over to you was this idea about bringing work home, sleepovers for the kids, and what age. And then, dude, I got to talk to you about lab-grown diamonds. I have to talk to you about that today. But before we get there, let's talk about what you were talking about with. Let's talk about what you were talking about with Joe Rogan. I thought that was a really interesting take you had, and let's start there.
Well, it started with you calling me stubborn again. And that's come up from a couple of people that listen to the podcast. And I get it, you know, like I've said, and it's almost like, you know, like on the home team episodes, you guys laugh at me that I'm like strong beliefs loosely held. But the example that I brought up with, I sent you a really interesting Rogan compilation, because what it was, and you know, Rogan is so unique because he's had hours and hours of podcasts now throughout like so many years. So it's interesting because you have access to
tens of thousands, right? Like, I mean, or more.
It's so interesting because I don't think anyone else literally on the planet that you would have such access to, like, this is what he believed 10 years ago, and this is how strongly he felt about it, and this is like how he voiced it, and so on and so forth. And you can go back, you can reference it, you can watch it, and then to see it now and how it's changed. And the compilation of clips was specific to faith, because it came out recently, because he had, blanking on the name, but he had really interesting guest who's like a Christianity like historian and expert, who walked him through a lot of like the actual archaeological evidence and like historical evidence of like the things that are in the Bible. And it's super interesting because I had this belief as well, you know, 5-6 years ago, that a lot of those stories are just that. They're stories, they're myth, there's something that was like written in a book and people believe it, they believe it out of faith. And I thought it was really interesting to actually uncover like the historical context and stuff. But anyway, that conversation seemingly has led Joe to like attend church now and attend it regularly. And the compilation of clips that I sent you was dating back to like, you know, 10 years ago when Joe like openly like made fun of anyone that believed in religion, like ridiculed it. He was like, this is crazy. Like, it's people believing fairy tales and like so on and so forth. And it was just and then it had this like evolution throughout the years of him clearly kind of turning the corner to like, hey, well, you know, he kind of went from like making fun of it, dismissing it, to being open to the fact that people that have a strong faith seem to be happier and seem to be doing well. And it seems to be generally a good idea for people to have this like greater sense that, you know, provides them a moral compass and gives them direction what to do, to now where he, you know, seems, I don't know if I would say all in, but very much on this journey. And the point that I was trying to make with that is, you know, I feel like sometimes, and you say this about me, and I know that people bring it up that listen to the podcast, and it's like, oh, Gabe is so stubborn. Like, I think the expectation that I'm going to change my mind about something I feel very strongly about in the span of like a 50-minute podcast is not what I think is being open-minded. What I do know is going to be true is when I listen to some of the things that maybe I believe now, 10 years from now, I'm probably going to listen back to it and be like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I thought that thing, or that I felt so strongly about this thing, or whatever. Because in 10 years, I'll have 10 more years of like lived experience. I'll be, you know, wiser, hopefully. I'll have so many things that will shape my opinions then that simply don't shape my opinions now. But then does
that change how strongly you come across your opinions today? That's something
because
like, if you know that 10 years from now, your opinions, like, you'll maybe look back on some of the stuff you say now and be like, damn, dude, like my life, like, so now, like, so like pulling on that thread a little bit more. So today you say, whatever, training, like, dude, you have to lift weights. Let's just, whatever. And then 10 years from now, you realize like, damn, dude, like, so does it change when you speak about things to share it with less, I don't want to say conviction, but just even when you share it? Like, dude, I know for me, man, like, it's so interesting about nutrition in particular, because now with the sugar diet and with, like, it is just crazy to me how many different things work for different people. So like, does that change the way you approach things? Do you get what I'm saying about that?
Yeah,
like, I don't know if that makes sense.
100%. But the thing is, like, I don't know what those things are. And I don't know what things 10 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, I am so glad that I was so doubled down on that thing back then, because it positively shaped how I raised a family and how I did these things. Like, I'm so glad I felt so strongly about that. There's going to be those things. And there's also going to be the things that I'm like, man, like looking back on that, like I kind of had that wrong. And right now it's impossible to distinguish which one is which. All I can do is, and this is when I listen to podcasts, when I read books, when I have conversations with you, like all I want to do is like try and give my best case for why I feel the way that I feel. Hopefully you reciprocate that, especially if you disagree, like, and have an open mind to like, what am I not seeing? But to me, having an open mind doesn't mean that by the end of the podcast, I should be like, oh yeah, like you're right. Completely changed my mind about that. Like that to me seems like kind of silly and unrealistic and not what being open-minded actually means, because I just want a compelling case about why maybe some of the things that I'm saying are off base. And that's why I encourage people, like, if you disagree with something that I said, like, please email in. I've had amazing conversations on Instagram and on email with people that have like not seen eye to eye with some of the things I've said about like providing and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, like we come up with like a really good, like, oh, I didn't see it that way, so on and so forth. Or they didn't see the way that I was trying to portray what I said, because I didn't have the time to like voice it in the way that I wanted to voice it. So nothing but positive comes out with like just being like, hey, I think you got this wrong for XYZ. And I don't know, I'd like to think that I'm like pretty open-minded to that stuff, because the thing that I'll never do is just be like, well, you're just wrong and I don't want to hear you out. Like that to me is what actually being stubborn and closed-minded is, not just being passionate about what you think about.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back and listen to you and MDV talk about macros or whatever, that one, dude, like I mean, that one just went off forever about
maybe. And again, like, you know, you take two people that feel very strongly on opposite sides of the things, and like, that's kind of what you're going to get. I still think that it's absolutely the best approach. And like, I don't know, maybe 5 years from now, I'll be like, hey, that was silly. But, and the thing with that specifically now is, man, it's been so fun to work like one-on-one with guys with their fitness and nutrition. And just like, I feel like it's similar to saying something about coaching without ever coaching on the floor, right? Like something we talked about all the time. I think theoretically, there are some things that like people might look at, like how you go out there and coach a stellar class. And we've talked about this ad nauseum with what we did with Coach Like a Pro and the collective and so on. You just have a different perspective once you're actually on the floor day in and day out, like experiencing it. And for me now, helping like actual guys with nutrition, like actually like, here's what we're going to do every week, feeling like, how did that work? How did that not work? It's just become like so clear to me that like this whole, hey, just eat more whole foods and quality matters is like too abstract, and like puts it almost on like such a high pedestal of what you have to do to clean up your nutrition. Whereas if you start with, hey, I'm going to give you numbers. You're going to download an app. You're going to put everything you eat in this app and try and hit those numbers, you get to the end result a lot quicker, which the end result is eating less processed foods and eating more, you know, like balanced diet. We're trying to get to the same end result. It's just, again, in my experience, and because it's so black and white, I think that is 1000% how I'd approach it for most people. Now, there are going to be some people that just want to know, hey, give me a list of what I can eat and what I can't eat. And I think that that's a lot easier if you don't have kids. I think that that's a lot easier if you're like in a stage of life where you can control all those things. But for most people who need some flexibility, dude, just learning how to like track your food and the impact that like specific macros have on like body composition and performance, like 100%. Can't convince me otherwise.
It's really, can't convince me otherwise.
You can't. I mean, so let me reword that. I haven't heard a compelling case to convince me otherwise, because we end up at the same end result, which is people eating more whole foods.
I think what the most fascinating thing. So when this episode releases, right now, today we're recording, today's the 5th. I think this episode releases like in a couple of days, right? And our TH45 challenge is up Father's Day, which is June 15th. The craziest thing that I've realized about the TH45 challenge, the absolute craziest thing, I get so many messages about the change that people have seen, is I really think it's two things. I think it's number one, the 50 grams of protein to start the day. And number 2, removing alcohol. And sure, the workouts. But I think those 2 in itself have been the most physically changing for most guys because is the protein in the morning and no alcohol. And then I'll layer on that. I know that sounds stupid because I'm like naming off a bunch of shit, and the burpees. So like the burpee consistency, the protein, and the no alcohol. But the reason why I find that so powerful is so yesterday I was getting blood work done. I'm re-upping a different type of life insurance. I want to just get a quote for it. And I already have a life insurance policy, but I wanted to get a different quote. So they need to do urine, blood, full analysis. So yesterday they came at 9:30 to my house or 10 without me eating. I didn't eat until then. So I guess technically I broke the 50 grams by 9 a.m., but it's because I was fasting for a blood work. So I kind of, whatever. But dude, I realized that, and this is an interesting topic to discuss, is that does your body adapt to what you just do and you start to feel normal? So what happened is for many years, I would fast until like 2:00 in the afternoon in general. Since the TH45, I've been eating 50 grams of protein after my workout at before 9 a.m. And I've been doing a little bit of pre-workout, the Go One More, like a little bit of sugar type stuff. And dude, I've been feeling great, right? I've been feeling awesome. And I've been doing my burpees and all that stuff. But yesterday, I wasn't able to eat because of the blood test. And I found myself to become more irritable. I found the recipe for me feeling anxious and irritable is this right here. Wake up early, drink coffee, eat nothing, get on my phone. Recipe for anxiety. Like literally recipe for anxiety. Like, and feeling like shit. Recipe for not feeling like shit, avoiding the coffee until like, or eating something, coffee, and then working out and diving into, in my case, I've been diving into the Bible every day. But all right, I just wanted to pause there for a second because, dude, I think the protein in the morning has been so instrumental for so many guys.
And again, like, I can't say this enough too. Like all the stuff that we talk about, whether it's about like, a guy's role as a provider or like how you eat, like however, quote unquote controversial or not it is. If what you're doing is working for you, like don't change a thing. Like who am I to tell you, how you should be structuring your family or like what you should be eating? Like, dude, if you are like, I am fulfilled, family's rocking and rolling, like whatever, like that kind of speaks to the email that you got. Like, why are you like, it is what it is. Like, we're just kind of trying to put maybe what works for us or like our opinions out there for guys that like in any respect are just feeling like they could do better. Nutrition, how to approach being a dad, a husband, all of that. But like, if everything's working for you, and again, this stemmed from you bringing up nutrition, because if you do intermittent fasting, you're like, dude, I feel super clear-minded in the morning, like energy isn't a problem, body composition exactly where I want it, I don't have any cravings at the end of the day, like keep doing intermittent fasting. Like don't try and fix something that isn't broken. Like I can't stress that enough. Again, the 50 grams in the morning, just to me, based off what I've read, based off everything, all the people that I like really look up to in the nutrition space, based on now firsthand experience, just generally seems to be something that solves a lot of problems for a lot of people. So if you feel like you want to change something, it's a good place to start. But that's not to say that like, if you're not eating 50 grams of protein, you're doing it wrong, especially if whatever you're doing is working for you.
Dude, yeah. I want to talk about book and a bunch of other stuff that you have listed here, but I want to, before we get into any of it, I got to talk about lab-grown diamonds. This is something that like, so this is going to like blow some guys' minds right now. It really is. Are you familiar with this? Do you know what lab-grown diamonds are?
Diamonds grown in a lab, I guess.
so traditionally,
but
diamonds
I don't know much about it.
Yeah, traditionally diamonds are, I don't know, I guess harvested all over the world, and obviously there's like blood diamonds, all this kind of stuff. But traditionally, for generations, when someone gets married, this is like just traditionally, and I'm not saying dude, you decide to do a wedding band, you decide to do something different, like a wedding band, that's you. But traditionally is, a guy gets a girl or whatever, a nice diamond ring. And at the time, it's like a big deal. So I'll use myself as an example. I graduated from college at 21. I opened the gym the same year. When I was in college. When I was in college, I proposed to Ashley. I was a senior in college. So at the time I was working at the gym, I was making good money selling gym memberships, but obviously not like, real money. I was in college. And I remember buying this ring and it was $21,000 at the time. And that was a lot of money back in 2007 or 8. And it still is a lot of money today. But I remember working with the jeweler and taking a lot of pride and attention, and like this being something like I knew it was going to be really special for her and it was very special for me, and I wanted it to be perfect. And I was going to spend all the money I had to make this thing perfect as a sign of like my commitment and dedication to this marriage. Okay. Well, now I'm in a Uber the other day with a guy, and he's 27, about to propose to his girlfriend. And I hear him, I'm in the front seat, and I hear him and another guy talking in the back, how he ordered in a lab-grown diamond, 2-carat, perfect diamond, perfect. And he paid all in $2,000. Okay. When I talked to the jeweler about that same thing, he says right now, lab-grown 2-carat, perfect, $200. That's the cost. That's what they cost now. So because they could grow them in a lab and they're absolutely immaculate, the cost of the goods have now dropped so much. So I'll finish up this story. So yesterday, Ashley had like this earring that was causing a problem. So I go into the jeweler to go help her out. And I say, hey, what do you think about these lab-grown diamonds? He goes, I think they're going to be a big problem. And I said, why? He goes, because when a woman is asked to marry her, it's looked at as this like really valuable moment in time where like the guy went out, spent money, spent time, put a lot of focus. And like, this was like a very like, it was substantial. It was a substantial moment. Now you can get a 2-3-carat lab grown for $200. So it doesn't drive the same attention and focus from the guy. It's just like buying something off Amazon and giving it to her. And he thinks long-term, it's going to change the way people like look at wedding rings. So I was wondering, like, I don't know if I'm describing that as well as possible, but like, do you get what I'm saying? How when you proposed, it was like, here, like, dude, this is a big deal. Now it's like, oh yeah, I can get it for $200 and get a 3-carat beautiful diamond.
Yeah, I mean, dude, there's a lot of places you can take this conversation. I mean, one of the things I wanted to,
crazy, right?
Yeah. But it's kind of like, is it the amount that you spend that should kind of directly correlate with like the moment and the fact that it's this big commitment? And like, it's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, is this just another symptom is like I don't know, it feels like a weird word, but is this is this another offshoot of like marriage just not meaning what it used to mean? Right. Oh. Like, it's just like, you check off the box after you're like together with someone a while, you get married. Or is this like what the jeweler was saying, just because this is like this more inexpensive thing, it like diminishes the value of the moment or the value of the commitment? I don't know. It's tough to say. I do know that like people are getting married a lot less. And generally speaking, in terms of, statistics, the one thing I wanted to talk to you about is, that pendulum seems to be swinging, in the other direction now with more, traditional values and traditional, gender roles kind of like coming back into vogue and causing some controversy there. But I don't know. I haven't.
You know what I'm saying about the diamond? I hadn't thought about it through that lens, right? It's not as simple as like, hey, just go cheaper and a beautiful diamond. It's like, does that now change like in the future, is that going to change the proposal process? Like, is it going to put, I don't know. It's just.
But what would it change it to? Something like more.
Well, like, okay. When you make a big purchase, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. That purchase has weight because you're taking these things that you've sacrificed for, you've worked really hard for to acquire something, whatever it is, right? And now all of a sudden, if you could get something that's so substantial, such as like moment, and it's just like for $200, does that even change? And maybe the answer that people are going to be talking on the podcast be like, bro, you're tripping. It doesn't matter the cost. It's about the intention behind it. Of course. But like, I wonder in the future where that leads to, like, because like, I know for me, like it was a moment in time for me. I spent a year picking it out, planning, saving for it. Like, it was really important to me. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience here. Other guys might be different here, but like, it was a big moment because I had to sacrifice a lot, and it put a lot of importance on this like moment. But if it's just like something you could order on Amazon, like, does it give the same weight? And does it even matter? I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up here because I imagine a lot of people aren't familiar with lab grown diamonds. And I do think it's going to shape for our children how things might evolve.
And let me ask you, do you think that like this being such a big deal, because it was for me as well, and I actually like was super blessed and honestly was incredibly grateful because when I asked Larry, my father-in-law, which I did, which he was surprised that I even did this, which, you know, goes back to traditional values as well. But like, it was always my intention, and I was always raised that like, once I knew that I was going to marry, you know, Ariel in this case, like I was going to find time and sit down with Larry and Allie, my in-laws, and ask them for permission. Like I was going to say, like, I would like to marry your daughter and I want both of your blessing to do so. And it was like a big deal. I remember I was going to do it on one trip and I completely chickened out. And finally on the second time, I like went ahead and did it. But after I did that, Ariel's mom offered me the like family,
the family heirloom,
the family heirloom ring to use the diamond, the stone from that to then make Ariel. So I had that part of kind of the purchase like covered. That allowed me to obviously, you know, kind of like probably afford something that was a lot nicer to like make the final ring. But anyway, what I was going to ask you is, because I remember that process too, how much of that do you think is meaningful for the guy who's, you know, going back to something we've talked about in like, you know, past episodes? Like, I truly believe that we have it like just in our, I don't know if you call it like DNA, instinct, just traditionally, like that to me is like the first calling to like in many ways provide, right? Like there's a reason you want to save up a year to get something really nice. There's a reason that you don't want to, you know, bargain shop the ring that you're going to give Ashley.
What it really came down to though, Gabe, is like, I knew what she wanted to make her happy. Like it wasn't,
sure, but
I knew that she had a vision of like this thing that she wanted for life that was like, you know, she wants nice things.
But yes, but I think that there's a reason that felt so fulfilling for you because it took work. It took work to deliver the financial means to do that.
Yeah.
And so what I was going to ask you is, I'm wondering, like, this being diminished, if it goes that way, do you think it's diminishing like the role that has for the guy or for the girl? Like, what do you think means more? Like the girl feeling like she's getting, you know, this thing that you worked so hard to save up for? Or like, are we getting away from this, like, you know, intangible kind of like first opportunity to like really, really understand what your hard work and financial success can deliver in like a really meaningful and special way? And
I think if you ask most guys over the years, like regardless if you paid $1,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is for a ring, regardless.
I think that regardless of what you pay,
right,
relative to where you're at that time,
exactly.
Everyone
you were trying to like,
it's like the biggest purchase you've made till that point for anyone.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It doesn't matter how much it is at the time; it carries big weight.
It's a scary purchase. You're like, I haven't paid for this. I haven't paid this much for anything like until this point.
Dude, I remember specifically, I wasn't able to pay the whole thing in cash, and I had to put on a credit card because I really wanted this one thing, and I didn't have enough money. I'll never forget that. But yeah, man, I just think it brings up a really good point because that provided me a lot of fulfillment that I felt like, hey, this is something that's really important in our relationship, or not even our relationship. This is something important to her. I want to be able to do that, and it was a stretch. It like gave me a goal. It was like I was finding fulfillment by purpose and fulfillment by trying to get that goal. And now, you know, if I was able to do that, you know, by, ordering it on, you know, Amazon for, you know what I mean? Like it's not the same thing, you know what I mean?
For sure. And that's where I was thinking, like, you know, who does that impact more? The fact that you don't get this, you know, many ways coming of age experience of like making a super scary purchase and working really hard and saving up for something that is not I mean, you get a lot of joy from the moment too, but it's literally to just like make this moment for this person you want to spend the rest of your time with, make it special for them. Like it's the first time that you like really dig deep into the pocketbook for someone else in many ways, which to me is like what provide boils down to. Like, is it taken away from that moment or is it taken away from the flip side? And then maybe it'd be interesting, talk to Ashley about that or Ariel, like how much of that moment was special to them because they knew the amount of like sacrifice and the price tag that was on this thing, or was it more like the thought that went into like where it happened, how it happened, so on and so forth. And I'm sure it's a little bit of everything, but it would be cool to get their takes on that.
No, I think you're right though. I think it was probably, for me, it was probably more about like being able to achieve this thing purpose-driven,
100%,
have a goal.
100%.
I don't think it mattered as much to her. I think for her, it was more about like how it was done, stuff like that, which is so interesting when you look at the psychology there, right? Is that, I think guys want to have some type of purpose and pursuit. And I think that was an example of one. You could find that in so many different ways, right? Like now as a dad, it's totally different. Like, dude, we're building out this batting cage right now. Like that's really exciting for me. But dude, you talked about the asking the in-laws. I wonder how that's going to evolve in the future. I remember for me very specifically, and I have a little regret here for sure. I didn't realize at the time I was young. I'm totally making excuses here, but with my father-in-law, I asked him, but my in-laws are separated, right? And I didn't even, looking back on it, it's like, why? That's so stupid. Why didn't I go and separately talk to my mother-in-law? And I didn't. I did not. I found out that years later that I never talked to her. And I think where she was hurt, and this is an advice for, I don't know if we have any guys in their 20s who listen. I'm sure we do. But this is some advice, is if you're going to ask.
But we have a lot of dads that are raising sons. I think about all this stuff in that context, man. Like all of the things that like, oh, I wish I would have done that differently, is hopefully a lesson that I can, pass down to my son. But anyway.
Dude, I mean, well, my father-in-law made me feel, lessons that I've learned from him are immense. Like one day we should have a podcast only on that. But, he, since day one, has never made me feel anything other than just like, dude, you treat, Ashley right. Like we're all good. Like doesn't care about money, doesn't care about anything. But I remember when I asked him, he was very supportive, but he had told his new wife, right? My stepmother-in-law, wonderful people, love them. But my mother-in-law didn't find out until I had asked Ashley. So she was hurt. I found out years later because as the mom, she found out after the stepmom, and I didn't even put two and two together. And so, something I'll impart with my son as he gets older is like, hey, if you do get married to a family that is divorced, which in this day and age is going to be pretty common, just make sure that you get those checks and balances right. Like you want the mom and the dad to find out. You want to talk to them both. I wish I had done that. I regret that for sure.
How much of this stuff that is tradition is like
necessary,
like outdated? Like a lot of people would say that some of this stuff is outdated, unnecessary. They would point to like, the origins of it being stuff that's negative. Like, for example, the reason you ask the dad and not necessarily the mom, and like that's how both of us spoke about it, right? Like there's literally a reason that you asked dad, and there's obviously some complicated stuff there that, I can completely understand why you didn't ask mom, but I said it. They were both there, but my intention was to ask Larry, not to ask Al, right? Mm. And some people would say that like, that's rooted in the origin of like, you're like, the men own the women, right? And like, you have to ask like the passing down of that. That's where some of that stuff
which is so odd, which is not the intention. Like
it's not the intention 100%, but that's how some of this stuff gets criticized now. But how much value, like how important is it for Caden to eventually ask the blessing of who he's going to marry?
I think what the future holds for this stuff, like, let's just put it this way. If someone wanted to marry Ava, I would expect that the guy would talk to Ashley and I. It's not me only.
100%. 100%.
And I think that's how things have evolved, right? I think that there's like a sign of respect.
How would you want them to ask?
Well, so, but like
what's the ask?
But no, would you agree that maybe things have evolved? Like, so what you said, like, I think it's true from like hundreds of years ago, right?
Yes.
Like, and then there's a whole like, I mean, obviously if you go like historical, right? But I think that for me, I think it's really important that I think out of this sign of like, hey, I think a lot of it comes down to respect for the parents. That's it. But it's not just the respect for the dad. I think that's really important. Like I would want that person, like if I was back 20 years ago and I asked or whatever, however long it was, I would have been disappointed that, I didn't go and speak to the mom as well. That was a really big miss on my part.
Yeah. So like looking it up, it comes back from like, ancient and biblical origins. It was like marriage was very much a transaction. So it's very much like, like
I'm going to trade you 3, whatever, like.
It's like a business decision between like one man to another. So like, people can criticize some of this stuff as like, obviously that's not what it is now. But, in the modern era, it's more, I think exactly what you said. It's like symbolic respect and nothing beyond that. But yeah, man, like even thinking about it now, like, why do you ask? Because it wasn't asking for permission. Because it's not like, I don't know, like what if he says no? Are you not marrying the woman you love? Is there any expectation that it's going to be no? Do you approach it in like, hey, I just want to let you know, but I'm doing this anyway? I'm trying to remember exactly how I asked.
I remember how I did it.
What did you say?
I said, hey, Jeff, I'm going to ask your daughter to marry me. And I would really appreciate it if I had your support. And I remember
such a Jason way to ask it.
I remember saying it like that because like, I wanted it to be like, like I feel like, all right, I'm doing this,
a little bit of confidence. But, no, I like that. Yeah. I'm doing this. And like, I would appreciate your support. I like that.
And I think the reason why it's important, I mean, dude, obviously every relationship's different. Every family's different. But I think the reason why I would find it important is that like, dude, you're marrying into a family. And I think here's why I'll backtrack it is that this is like a Nick Freitas thing, right? I would want Ava to want that guy to come and talk to us. Does that mean so? 100%, I would want it to be her
100%,
decision where she's like, and I would hope that we parent well enough that it gets to that point, like where she's like, wait, what? You didn't talk to my dad and mom? Like what? Like that's what I would want. That's the best way to summarize this whole conversation, right? Is that it should be her decision, and that we should impart it so much that it would make it where she knows that it's important to like pull us all into the decision-making process.
It's having a daughter. You know how you like can't explain having kids, but then the level beyond that, especially because like, we had our son first and now like our daughter is, Charlie's like a year. She has a little bit of personality. Dude, the level of like love and just like, I don't know what the word would be, like protectism, whatever that you feel for like your daughter is just like on another level, man. It's crazy how different it is. Obviously I love both my kids to death, but like, man, like once you have a girl, it's just, you're screwed in so many ways. And
they have you wrapped up.
Oh, dude, 100%. And I think that, when the moment comes where, they're going to go on and build their own life, what that process looks like, at a minimum, you would appreciate, I mean, the expectation should be that there should be just some respect there because it's going to be hard anyway. It's going to be hard if it's like the most perfect, like chivalrous, like perfect guy that like, is it ever going to feel like he's good enough? Is it ever going to feel like, like safe? And, you would expect that the least is that they would talk to you. It would be heartbreaking for it to just like happen and you to not even know.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that we're doing every day. I'm doing the best job I can so that one day that guy does show up. And I hope he does, dude. I want that guy to show up. I really do. Like, I cannot wait actually, because, that's going to provide Ava a ton of fulfillment and, and then with Caden too. But yeah, it is different with girls for sure. It's like Caden, kind of hurts himself. It's like, like just rub some dirt on it. And it's like but they also we have way different backgrounds of both those kids. So it's been a journey.
Oh man.
I had a question about, bringing work home and sleepovers and kids, but I know you had some things. Where do you want to go?
Wherever you want to go, man. Wherever you want to go.
So I got a question coming across, maybe Instagram. Yeah, it was Instagram. And this guy, he was basically saying to me, hey man, like I'm having a really difficult time. Work is causing a wedge between my wife and I, and it's causing friction between my kids and I because I'm bringing the work home. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know if I can continue on this. And so him and I had a little bit of a back and forth because, dude, anytime I get messages where it seems like someone's kind of hitting towards a wall, I always try and address it immediately as the best I can. I'm not some therapist. I just want to support where I can. And anyways, it brought up this good point and a good conversation that Ash and I were having, where I think that if you're a guy out there and you're struggling with bringing work home and it's causing friction in the house, I would just recommend two things. And I think these are really, really valuable tools. And so I was going to share them on social media, but I think they're better long form to discuss. The first one is just detachment. We've talked a little bit about this, but if you work from home, it's a little bit harder. If you work somewhere else and you get home, I think it's really important to like go in your backyard, go out for a walk as soon as you're home to decompress. That it's a moment in time where you don't bring stuff into the house. I think if you work from home, there's moments you can go outside, kind of go in your backyard, detach, de-stress, and then walk in, because it's not fair to bring in energy from the work of stress into them. And they feel it. I mean, I'm victim of this for sure. And it's something I pay a lot of attention to over the last couple of years. So I would strongly recommend the first thing is that if you find yourself bringing that into the house, find a space where you go to every day when you get home from work and or when you're at work, like at home, you go outside, you go do something. And that kind of gives you this moment that when you walk back in, you've reflected on it. They're not your coworkers. You're not at work. You're at home and you can't bring that into the house. So I wanted to start there. And then the second one that I think is even more important is, dude, you got to communicate with your spouse. You have to. And I think that there's something about this where a lot of guys want to hold this in and they want to kind of keep it close to the chest, but you're not fooling anybody. You're not. Like a lot of guys, they'll have problems at work and then they don't want to bring it home because they don't want to like put it on their wife. But instead they act like a jerk and they lash out. And it's even worse because you're not fooling anybody. You're pissed off, you're angry, and no one knows why. And what I would really encourage you to do is sit down and allow your wife, your spouse, whoever you have, to be pulled into what you're going on at work. Like, hey, this is what's happening. And I know for me, this has been a game changer for Ash and I. Dude, through the ups and downs of COVID, I mean, her and I have gone through a lot of difficult times. So we've learned how to communicate through that. But having her know, like, hey, this is what we have going on. This is why I feel this way. And the way you could support me on that would be this, has really been helpful in our relationship, because then she feels like she could also contribute in a way and she could understand what I'm going through. So those are the two pieces I just want to touch base on. If you're having a tough time bringing work home, dude, guys and girls think differently. They can't read your mind and you can't read her mind. So you got to communicate.
What's been really helpful for us is just establishing, we talked about this with like the end of year, like big meeting we have, but like just establishing times that are 100% dedicated to checking in on each other, that like, that's what the goal is, even when like there isn't anything going on. And the reason I think that that's super helpful is because one of the hardest things to do, and this was us, prior to us establishing some of this stuff, because we need to be better about communication now with the two kids and everything going on, is when something like this is going on, the hardest thing to do is to like start that conversation or be like, hey babe, like I really want to talk to you about this, because that almost feels super vulnerable. But the thing that's helpful for us is like every week we have like a dedicated time to just check in. And sometimes it'll be like, hey, everything's going great. Like nothing to talk about, like all good. We'll talk about something else. But the fact that that space has been carved out just makes it so easy. So if there is something going on, something a little bit more high stress, something that was frustrating during the week, something that like you want to address or she wants to address, we know that there's a time for it. So you don't have to like, hey, I think we need to talk. Because even that alone can come off a little heavy,
to like
right?
Put some
100%. Like it just puts you on the defensive or like whatever. But like we have now, it's on Sunday usually, where we get coffee and we time the kids' naps so that it's on a car ride, and we drive around for an hour and we just talk. And like, we know the kids are napping, we have coffee. It's like our like drive coffee date. And that's the time every week where we know we're like, it's not during the week. We're both together. We're just checking in and like figuring out like, hey, most of it ends up being like, what's the scheduling for next week and like who's doing what when. But it serves that purpose. And like, that would be my biggest piece of advice, because there's been many times where something that I probably wouldn't have brought up if I would have had to like, hey, I want to talk to you about this because that seems really kind of like heavy and it's tough to do. But the fact that like, oh, we're connecting now, we're kind of touching base on the week that I bring up or she brings up, and then we talk through it and it ends up being so much better because we did, is just because we've like set that time aside. So I think that that's been super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I just think every guy listening needs to take ownership in this whole process. So like, it's your fault. Like, it's your fault. Like, you can't go in and be that guy. And again, I'm raising my hand saying, dude, there's been plenty of times. I mean, man, during COVID was the worst, when they were shutting down our gyms left and right. Oh, it was very, very difficult for me to detach, very. And I struggled with it heavily. At that time though, Ashley had a lot of empathy and she understood what was going on. It was very clear. Like, oh, all the gyms shut down. Like, I get it. But oftentimes in regular work, like there aren't those moments where it's so black and white. And so I think just having that communication or the setting up time, like what you're talking about, of course, I just think that there's this stigma that, if you pull your wife into a conversation about work, that all of a sudden there's like a sign of weakness and whatever. And I think that what I've realized over time is like, yeah, you don't want to always be like the victim mindset and whatever. I'm not saying that. But like, dude, they're not stupid. They realize that something is going on. And if you don't talk about it, it just gets worse. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're smart people. They realize like, hey, this guy's off. He's probably off from work.
And they probably know you better than anyone else.
100%, right? So like, dude, anyways, you gotta communicate that stuff with your wife. And that was the advice I gave him. And I just hope that, someone can listen to that and impart that, because it'll be a game changer for them.
Yeah, man. I mean, I know that people have probably much stressful work environments than I have, but work from home is tough, dude. And it's tough because like there isn't that separation. It's obviously great, and I'm super grateful for many reasons, but I feel like exactly what you said is even more important if like the place where you work is steps from your home.
Of course.
Because it's so easy. And for me, this was one of the biggest things that I had to address, because when we first had the 2 kids, and so it was super busy, you kind of feel this guilt of like, I want to get in there as quickly as possible to like start helping and start supporting. Like, hey, she's been dealing with both of them all day, but like me getting in there 5-10 minutes sooner, and instead of like me like having some separation before I go in there, instead of like literally, like sending the last email or like typing the last sentence of what I have to do that day, or like getting on a call and boom, running in there was not the best approach at all. Because first of all, your mind is still like thinking about, some question you had or like some feedback you got or whatever, and you're not even fully there. And you're potentially coming in with the energy and the stress of it. So that was huge for me, because you almost feel like, this is like 5-10 minutes that I could be in there, starting to help out or just at least seeing the kids. But it's so worth having that separation, because you don't have a commute. You don't have that natural time built in to like, okay, I'm going home now. I'm switching those modes, switching those energies. So I know a lot of people work from home now, and that was super helpful for me, is just realizing that that's much better use of, an extra 10 minutes. And I still do it now.
Switching gears. Hey, did I tell you I went and toured the prison?
What prison? A prison? The prison? No, you didn't tell me.
Alameda County. So I'm sorry to tangent this, but like, dude, I got a bunch of travel lined up and we got some good stuff going on. I want to talk about the book before we close out for sure. But dude, I toured a prison the other day. Or it was a jail. And it was a jail that brought all the people from Oakland. So they had maximum security and minimum security. It was basically a holding jail in Alameda County until people get sent off to different prisons. So you have guys from all different gangs, you have whatever. And we're helping the Alameda County with their fitness, right? And so I go into this jail because they're putting a new gym inside the jail, not for the inmates, but for the guards. So in this particular sheriff's department, there's 400 guards that support, and they're sworn officers. And so most people start off in the jails and then transfer into other patrol roles. Anyways, dude, they were telling me like guards get into scuffles and fights like almost every day. And I mean, there's a lot going on in that jail. And so they take me in to show me where the gym is. And I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, whatever. Like, but the energy's heavy, dude. Like, it's heavy, like all whatever. But then like, oh, do you want to go in? And I was like, not really. I was like, I don't really have an interest to, but I could tell like the guys really wanted to show me and I didn't want to seem like a wimp. So dude, bro, you know, like how you see on Discovery Channel, like the octagon of like glass door windows, and then how you like go through double, like super thick metal doors. Dude, it was heavy, bro. And I walked onto the yard and I felt like there was going to be, it felt like I was in like a Prison Break movie or something. It was eye-opening. I think every kid should have to go into a jail like that because it's going to scare them straight, I imagine. And then we went into some of the, it was a very heavy experience. And it's shocking to me just how like the jobs those guards have, man. It's a tough job. And so shout out to all the guys who are out there patrolling those areas because it's a heavy job and someone's doing it. So thank you.
Super tough, man. Super tough. I'm just listening to a podcast now with someone who ended up going to prison, and he's like, literally, I just hit pause to jump on the recording here, and he was like into his like first couple days, and it's wild, man. It's wild. And this specific story too is wild too, because, you know, make the argument that he never should have gone. But anyway, it's
is that what it is? Yeah. I'll have more stories to share. I don't know how much I'll share on the podcast, but I'll talk to you about it soon. Cause like these guys I was with, I was like, yeah, dude, do you have this problem? Like, yeah, everything you see in the movies, it happens here on a regular basis, just not as like extreme, right? So like if the movies are like at 100, this is like at 80%, you know, between the violence and whatever. I really appreciate everyone who listens to this podcast. I also really appreciate everybody who's doing the TH45 challenge and who's on the app. And I want to encourage you guys to continue to hit up the community section. It has been on fire for now months at this point. And one way we want to keep the engagement going is a monthly, or we're committing to the next month, reading a book. And it's Let Them, right? Let Them by, let me pull up the author. Mel Robbins. So Let Them by Mel Robbins. And we are starting that book on Father's Day. And we're going to have a live call on July 11th. So, you know, if you're in the Train Hard app, make sure to be in there. We're going to be talking about the book on a regular basis and just trying to find a way to like, you know, share takeaways from it. I don't know what to expect from the book. I'm excited about it, and we'll be sharing our takeaways. So make sure to go pick up your book so you can read along with us.
Why'd you pick the book? Why that book?
I mean, a buddy of mine, Matt Olson, he hosts a men's club in SoCal, cancer survivor, just really, really good dude. A guy that I would consider someone I look up to, has older boys. He's leading from the front. He coaches. He's like, bro, you have to do it. And then when I read the description, it said something along the lines of like, you know, basically not allowing other people to, it just hit home. It says, free from the opinions, drama, and judgments of other people. I just think with social media in this day and age, it was relevant to me. So picked it. And I'm really excited about it. But this guy who I really look up to says I have to read it. So I'm going to read it.
I love a good book recommendation, man. I think I've read every book that's been recommended from a guest on the podcast. I love when people recommend books, man. It's cool. Cause sometimes when you go in and just want to like pick a book, it's like,
it's overwhelming too.
Where do I even start? And then you got to like make a commitment, and then like you start reading, and the worst thing that could possibly happen is you like start reading a book and you're like, I don't want to finish this. And then you feel like, well, you got to finish it. And it takes me forever to get through books because I read them at night and fall asleep pretty quick. So it's like a pretty big commitment to pick out a book. But no, I'm excited for this, man. I hope it's a good read. And even if it's not, you know, I hope that, you know, tying this back to how we started the podcast, I think that there's really good conversations to be had that hopefully come out of this, where some people might get something out of a book. Some people might see it completely different. Some people might have something that you didn't see, or, you know, a blind spot. Some people might really not like the message of the book and have a good reason why. And I think that all of that stuff is super valid. And hopefully that's what creates a really interesting conversation. And, you know, we're all just kind of leveling each other up. So,
yeah. I mean, that's the key. Like, again, if you're not on our Train Hard app, make sure to check out the podcast show notes. Like, go to th.fit. Like, what we're doing there is very, very special. And like, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you're like, oh yeah, I like these guys, but I'm not on the app. Dude, our training programs are world-class, but the community section is badass. Like, it is just a great accountability tool. We're in there regularly. And especially with this book club and other stuff that we're trying to do, like, we're trying to be more Like we're trying to do better and we want to be able to have different perspectives. That's why we have the show, but also the book. Like you said, Gabe, like how great is it if we get a book recommendation that I would never consider? Like something, I don't know. I don't even know. Like I've never heard of Mel Robbins and I've never heard of Let Them. So the fact of the matter is I would have never have picked that. So that's a great reason why.
You know what's crazy? The fact that you've, because I hadn't heard of her until recently, but she has a huge, huge podcast. Like we're talking like pretty close. I don't want to say Rogan numbers, but like, dude, her podcast is huge.
Isn't that funny how that works? Like
it's so interesting, man, because there's just so much like stuff out there and there's just so much like so many people and like really interesting ideas because like, you know, someone that's pretty plugged into podcasts and like, you know, self-development and all of that stuff, you could not even know someone exists and literally they have a huge, huge show. Like I think it's one of the top shows. I can't readily find any kind of list or something, but
that's an example though, dude. Like, but that's what we need. Like, that's exactly right. Like, you know, especially for podcast listeners, like I would just encourage all of us. And it's something I pay a lot of attention to. I know we talk about this on the show, but it's like, ultimately we're all byproducts of our own echo chamber. Like the people we hang out with, the things we consume, like I get it. And social media is making that even worse, way worse. And so we have to put time and attention in to get outside of that algorithm and to, you know, this is an example of it. And maybe this book is directly in line with our algorithm. I don't know, but who's to say that the next one won't be, right? It'll probably be different every single time.
For sure. A couple quick notes since we still have time. Dude, I hate the term terrible twos. I hate anything that just like feeds into this idea that like, you know, kids are in any way like it's such a like useless label to me. Because I think that raising kids is definitely hard. And I think every stage has its different challenges, but that's also what makes it like incredibly rewarding. And I think that like leaning into that and understanding why every stage is challenging is the way to get through it. But anyway, on that note, I get it. Like I 100% get like how the label exists and like why people would be like, oh my God, my kid turned 2 and it's like so much harder and a complete nightmare. I don't like using the label, but the one thing I was going to bring up, and I was sharing this with Liz, you know, Liz has a daughter who is a little bit older than our youngest. So we talk about like little kids a lot. And what I was going to ask you is like, you know, with the amount of access we have to information now with ChatGPT, I wonder if like some of this stuff is helpful or like you end up looking like way too much stuff up. Because the one thing that Ariel actually did this and she sent it to me, but it was rock on. And in this case, it was very helpful for us is she was asking like what type of like psychological and like developmental leaps kids hit at about 2.5 years old and how it can kind of explain because Shay, who turned 2.5, has like transformed into a different kid literally over the past like 30, 60 days. And it's actually very, very normal for this stage because as we looked up, you know, it's when they start feeling complex emotions like jealousy, pride, and embarrassment, but don't have any of the regulations to like manage those emotions. So they kind of become these like complete, like everything that people describe terrible to toddlers, like they become this, like they'll be so sweet one second and they'll just go like full on tantrum the next second for no apparent reason. They'll go from like being super sweet with his little sister to like smacking her in the face and throwing a toy at her for apparently no reason, no warning, no nothing. Like he'll just do those things. And he went from being like super independent to like super clingy, especially with Ariel, with mom, which is, you know, tough because there's another kid in the mix and like, you know, he wants to be picked up, she wants to be picked up. Like it's been very noticeable change. But in this case, you know, you like just chat into AI and like, hey, like what are the reasons for this? And it gave us like such a good explanation of like what it is, why it's happening. And for us, it was just kind of like one of those things of like, oh, this is perfectly normal. It's just the stage and he's just trying to figure it out. And these aren't tantrums or him being manipulative for being manipulative sakes. He's just like testing boundaries and trying to figure stuff out. And for us, it was very helpful. But I do always start to wonder where like now you can find an explanation for anything. At what point it's like too much information. But again, in this case, it was helpful, but man, dude, 2.5. And do you remember any of those like very distinct like shift in stages, man? Because he just went from being this like super chill, like would just sit down and play with this stuff, like very, very like you could just put Coco, like, you know, his little sister, 1-year-old, like next to him, he wouldn't do anything. And now it's like, dude, he is out of control at times.
I don't know, because, you know, Ava, we have an older daughter and she was pretty low key, I think. It's hard, man. I mean, dude, my kid's 14 and 11, but I also think my brain, you know, your brain has a weird way of removing negative and traumas, right? It has a way of protecting that. And
you remember the cute positives.
And I think for us, dude, it got so skewed because we were in the hospital so much starting when she was 4 and 5. So like all of the memories we have been so convoluted, right? We didn't have the typical like when Caden was 2, bro. Like, I mean, it was just different. So like I try and put myself in a traditional parent's shoes, and I can't necessarily relate because we had so much, especially with Ava going on, that everything with Caden just didn't seem like a big deal. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like it was like,
dude, it's so funny, man. Like perspective, and that's obviously like a extreme example.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's so true, man. Like we're going on a trip this weekend, and we're Shay's going to stay with his grandparents. Charlie's like a little too young, so we're bringing her with her. But we're like, dude, flying with one kid is the easiest thing on the planet. And when we only had one kid, it was the hardest thing on the planet.
Yeah.
It was like, it was stressful. It was like, all right, like go change a diaper, or like, I hope he doesn't poop on the plane, and he starts crying and you're like freaking out. Now, like when we do travel with just one, because Shay's staying behind, we're like, dude, kicking up our feet. It's like the easiest thing ever. Like I can hold her and Ariel can go to the bathroom without a kid. Like
resistance, right? It's like,
it's so funny. It's so funny.
Isn't it funny? Because like, it's like, we should come up with a term for this, but it's like the amount of exposure you have to adversity or struggle or challenges, like the weights, the easier, like, you know what I mean? Like it's just the way it goes. Like if you've never had exposure to 50-pound dumbbells, when you go to bench them, they're going to feel hella heavy. But if you've hit up hundreds, 50 is like no big deal, you know? Speaking of which, I did a death by EMOM today, which was not extremely enjoyable, but I actually liked it. I actually had fun doing it. So it was good. But bro, having an awesome trip. I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to Richmond.
Dude, you're going everywhere.
Yeah. And we're about to have our first tug of war tomorrow morning. So
can't wait to see it.
I have an idea for it. I think it's going to be good. We'll see.
Okay.
I want to bring like a whiteboard with me, but it's going to be good. Yeah. So, long story short, we got...
Long story short, like, don't call it terrible twos, but like, I'm with you. I understand. And again, actually, so speaking of book recommendations, Hunt, Gather, Parent, I brought that up on the podcast before. It's like anyone that asks for a parenting book recommendation, it's always like the only thing that I recommend. I think it's just so good. And now that they're at this age, it's actually a lot more relevant. So Ariel and I are kind of like revisiting it, and there's just so much good there. The TLDR, honestly, and it's super helpful, but much easier said than done, specifically with dealing with tantrums, is just like you can't raise the energy. Like there's no use in like trying to like, you know, like force a kid to calm down. You just kind of like let it do its thing. And it's been super helpful for us. But anyway, anyone else that's like reaching that like age 2 or older kids, I highly recommend this book. It's so good. So anyway.
Dude, I love it. Well, I'll keep everybody updated. I will be hosting some men's clubs. Also be doing some work with CBP, and I'll share with you guys how that goes. And I'll be able to share that next week or so. And then we are doing another men's club meetup in Vegas. So just stay tuned for that. That's going to be June 13th, I think. Richmond is the 9th, so it's already going to go down. And then we're doing another one in Winona, Minnesota, July 3rd. So stay tuned for that. We got more to come. This is just the first little road trip. I'm just learning a lot through this process, and the goal is just connect guys. So we will continue to talk about it on the podcast. We'll continue to share it on the newsletter, and then make sure to jump on the app.
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, hey, for everybody listening, appreciate you guys. You know, we always just share what's going on in our life. If you're getting value, if you pick up nuggets, share this podcast with a few friends, leave it a rating and review, and definitely go check out what we're doing. Train hard with the app. Let's get it.